And there we are. We have taken the time to be self-reflective, examine ourselves, and we've also began to examine how we view others. What's an underlying theme that is very important to us in both situations? Emotions. That's what this chapter is going to get into, so let's dive into it. What we want to talk about is the nature of emotions, feelings and moods, types of emotion, emotional intelligence, and living a happy life. The book gives us a very clear definition of emotions. Emotion is an intense reaction to an event, interpreting event meaning, becoming physiologically aroused, labeling the experience as an emotion, managing the emotion, and communicating through emotional displays and disclosures. There's certain parts of this that we're definitely going to agree with. But if you're like me, you may want to disagree on one or two little parts of this. Let's expand on the book. That was a good definition, comes right from it, and addresses it. But one thing I don't necessarily agree with is a conscious awareness of a stimuli. It's not necessary for us to have an emotion. Fear is part of the primal brain or the limbic system, which means we don't necessarily perceive something we're frightened of. We just know to get the fight or flight response going. If we waited until we said, oh, hey, that's a saber-toothed tiger, and that likes eating people, so I maybe should consider getting out of here. By the time we did all that, we've become dinner. So we can perceive something, but not necessarily consciously interpret it. As know, the brain receives millions of data pieces of information every moment that we live. Everything from our fingertips to our toes, to our ears, to our nose, all this data is being flooded into our brain. And for that reason, survival depended upon not necessarily interpreting things right away that we're scared of. Perhaps taking that shortcut and getting that fight or flight response ready. So our brain receives all this information and we can't perceive all of it. But there are also, besides environmental, besides that saber-toothed tiger, there's a possibility that we're having emotions based on other factors. These are some of them, and it's not limited to them. A chemical imbalance. If the mind isn't producing the proper amounts of chemicals, it can cause mood disorders. We see this. If we're not getting enough sleep, if we're eating too much of one type of food, there are multiple things that can cause an imbalance in our chemistry. And some of it can be genetic. Some of it can be things like the soda that we drink that has caffeine, or it could be the alcohol that we drink, or it could be a medication that we take. All of these can cause an imbalance, and that imbalance can cause an emotional response. There are also psychological conditions that can cause emotional issues. Depression is one that we commonly see. You know, when you're in that depressive cycle, it's really hard to come out of it because your body chemistry is responding differently. What is important to remember in our communication with others is that even though we may not be able to find the originating source of the emotion, we might be able to label what we're feeling. By labeling, we're then able to identify how we can deal with the emotion. We might be able to label that we're sad, but we can't identify why we're sad. But, all right, how would I do something to make me feel less sad? I might be able to identify that I'm happy. I might be able to identify that I'm fearful. All these things we can label without knowing the root cause. And this is important when we're communicating with others, because this means we can accept their emotion without a cause and still work with them to communicate in order to talk and to explore the emotion itself. An example of labeling without identifying: fear. This comes from Anir. Anxiety is thus a fear of fear. fear of something which escapes understanding, knowledge, fear of the enigmatic jouissance. I hope I said that correctly. It's a tough words. But the main thing is that when we have fear, we're not necessarily always sure of where it comes from because our mind has sped that through all the filters because it's important for us to have the fight or flight response. Accept emotions without explanation. This is what's kind of important in relationships. Sometimes when you're sad, you just have to say, I'm sad. I don't feel very good today. So that way you can deal with the emotion. Or if someone tells you, I'm mad, and you say, well, why are you mad? And they say, I don't know, I'm just mad. Sometimes it's beneficial in that relationship to accept that and to give them their space. You know, because there are times when the emotions will be beyond what we can express or find the origination from. Redefining emotions. A response of whole organism involving physiological arousal, which means that fight or flight. It may be we start blushing, we might start sweating, our heart might start pounding, our digestive system might slow down. There's a number of things that happen. We express the behavior. Oh no, I'm frightened. Or, oh no, I'm happy. And then it becomes a conscious experience. This is the James Lange theory, and it's the common one that you oftentimes see. It's important in communication because in communication, we have to sometimes accept who we're communicating with, their emotions, and accept our feelings without necessarily being able to label them. Emotional sharing is communicated by talking about emotion and experience with others. This goes back to that sphere of influence. When you're doing emotional sharing, it is oftentimes with those people in that close sphere, the one that's closest to you, family, friends, perhaps a therapist, spouses. All these people become in that inner circle because you feel you can express to them, that you can peel back the onion and that you can share information with them. And these are the important people to have in your life. Because when you don't have someone to share emotions with and you're experiencing emotions, it can be difficult to straighten them out. Emotional contagion. This is one that we see oftentimes. And it's one that probably this pandemic is probably really creating more of. People are becoming depressed because they can't get out and see people. They've been isolated. And so other people become sad because they're sad. And it becomes a contagion. It's like a cold going around. Suicides within a community, we see this, where within a community, it seems to spread. Another great example is H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds in the 1930s. This was a radio reenactment of an invasion of Earth by Martians. And what happened was it became an emotional contagion. People got fearful because they didn't turn on to the first part of the radio broadcast saying this is a reenactment. So I thought it was a live newscast. So fear spread throughout communities, throughout the entire country. People were driving to empty fields with their shotguns ready to take on the aliens, only to find it was still an empty field. Sadness. This is another one that can be passed. If you're around someone that's depressed or sad, you can become depressed or sad yourself. The good news is it works on the other side too. If you're around someone that's happy and in a good mood and ready to take on the world, after you're around them for a little bit, you feel that you're ready to take on the world. What we're going to do now is take a break. In that break, go ahead and down below post something about any of this. A time that you were frightened and then you discovered why later on. A time that you had an emotional experience and before you knew it, everyone in the house was feeling the same way you were feeling. So go ahead and share some type of emotional experience that you've had. It doesn't have to be too deep. It can just be you went to a concert. Everyone was in a great mood. And before you knew it, so were you. Music is a great connection into any type of emotion as well. Go ahead and take this break. This was a short 10-minute intro to this section. After your break, come back, watch part 2, and we'll find out if it's a feeling or a mood.